The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the velvet expanse of space, their light stretching across the void to touch the edges of a planet that had long been whispered about in hushed tones. It was here, on this world cloaked in mystery and ancient secrets, that humanity's most improbable chapter began. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the very fabric of existence held its breath, waiting for what would unfold next. In the heart of an alien citadel carved from iridescent crystal, where walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent hues, stood a warrior unlike any other, a human man whose presence seemed to command both awe and unease. He moved with purpose, his every step echoing softly against the polished floors that reflected not just his silhouette but also the weight of countless battles fought under skies far removed from Earth's familiar blue. His armor bore the scars of those conflicts, dents and scratches etched into metal that gleamed despite its wear, each mark telling a story of survival against impossible odds. A sword hung at his side, its blade forged from materials unknown even to the brightest minds among humans, glinting menacingly in the ambient glow of the chamber. Yet it wasn't the weapon or the armor that drew attention. It was him. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, carried within them the depth of years spent navigating chaos and despair. They spoke of losses endured, victories hard won, and a resolve so unshakable that it could bend fate itself to its will. He wasn't tall by human standards, nor did he possess the towering physique often associated with legendary heroes. But there was something undeniably magnetic about him, something primal yet profoundly intelligent, fierce yet tempered with wisdom. Even now, standing amidst beings who regarded themselves as superior in every conceivable way, he radiated a quiet authority that silenced whispers and turned heads. Around him, the aliens of this strange realm watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Their forms were elegant, almost ethereal, with skin that shimmered like liquid starlight and features too perfect to belong to mere mortals. And yet, they couldn't look away from him. To them, he was an enigma wrapped in contradiction, a fragile creature made of flesh and bone who somehow wielded power beyond comprehension. Rumors had spread like wildfire through their ranks since his arrival, tales spun from fragments of truth and embellished with fear. Some claimed he was a destroyer of worlds, others whispered that he carried the essence of creation itself within him. Whatever the truth might be, one thing was certain: he had come seeking answers, and no force in the universe would stop him from finding them. As the warrior stepped further into the grand hall, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The air grew heavier, charged with an electric tension that crackled between the assembled crowd and the lone figure at its center. At the far end of the chamber, seated upon a throne that seemed to float atop a cascade of living light, was she, the alien queen. Her beauty transcended mortal understanding, a vision of perfection that left even the most stoic of her subjects breathless. Her hair flowed like rivers of molten silver, cascading down her shoulders in waves that caught and refracted the ambient glow, creating prismatic halos around her form. Her eyes, vast and luminous, held galaxies within their depths, swirling with colors that defied description. She was neither entirely solid nor fully ephemeral, her presence oscillating between tangible reality and dreamlike illusion. When she spoke, her voice resonated like a symphony, layered with harmonies that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "So the rumors are true," she began, her words soft yet carrying an undeniable gravity. "You are the true human legend." There was no mockery in her tone, only genuine wonder, and perhaps a flicker of something deeper, more complex. Her gaze locked onto his, piercing through layers of armor and resolve as if peeling back the veil of time itself. For a moment, the entire room seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them suspended in an infinite void. The warrior didn't flinch under her scrutiny. Instead, he met her stare with equal intensity, his expression unreadable but his stance unwavering. Around them, the courtiers exchanged furtive glances, their earlier murmurs fading into stunned silence. None dared interrupt this exchange, for it felt like witnessing the collision of two forces of nature, each formidable in its own right, each brimming with mysteries that threatened to unravel the cosmos should they clash. Yet there was no hostility in the air, only a profound sense of inevitability, as though the threads of destiny had woven these two together long before either had taken their first breaths. Her words lingered in the air, heavy with implications neither fully understood nor acknowledged. The queen leaned forward slightly, her movements fluid and deliberate, like water flowing over polished stone. "Tell me, human," she continued, her voice tinged with a mixture of reverence and skepticism, "what drives you? What compels a being such as yourself to traverse the stars, to defy the boundaries of your kind? Her question hung there, pregnant with meaning, demanding an answer that went beyond mere words. For a fleeting instant, the warrior hesitated, not out of fear, but because the enormity of her inquiry struck a chord deep within him. Memories surged unbidden to the surface. The faces of comrades lost, the cries of civilizations crumbling, the endless march of battles fought not for glory but for survival. Each memory carried its own weight, its own burden, and yet they all converged into a singular truth that defined him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, cutting through the charged silence like a blade. "I fight," he said simply, "because I must." The simplicity of his response belied the complexity behind it. His eyes darkened, shadows of pain and determination flickering across his features. Not for conquest, not for vengeance, but because there is no one else. Because when the darkness comes, and it always does, it falls to those who can stand to hold the line. The queen tilted her head ever so slightly, her expression shifting imperceptibly. If she found his answer lacking, she gave no sign. Instead, her lips curved into a faint smile, one that hinted at amusement but also something far more inscrutable. "A noble sentiment," she murmured, her voice lilting with a melody that seemed to dance along the edge of comprehension. "But tell me, human, do you truly believe you are alone in this endeavor? That yours is the only hand capable of shaping the fate of worlds?" Her question struck him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront doubts he had long buried beneath layers of duty and resolve. Was he truly alone? Or was it arrogance, however unintentional, that drove him to shoulder burdens meant for gods? Before he could respond, she rose gracefully from her throne, her form radiating an aura of regal authority that silenced even the faintest whisper of dissent in the chamber. With measured steps, she descended toward him, her gaze never— "You intrigue me," she admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she drew closer. "In all my centuries, I have encountered many who sought to challenge the order of things, to rewrite the rules of existence itself. But none have done so with the ferocity of conviction I see in you." She paused, her luminous eyes searching his face as though trying to decipher some hidden code. "And yet, you carry sorrow. A great, unrelenting sorrow that clings to you like a second skin. Tell me, human legend, what is it that haunts you?" Her words struck a nerve, unraveling threads of emotion he had long kept tightly wound. The warrior clenched his fists briefly, his jaw tightening as memories threatened to overwhelm him. He thought of the homeworld he had left behind, scorched and broken under alien skies. He thought of friends who had stood beside him until their final breaths, their laughter still echoing in the recesses of his mind. He thought of promises made and broken, dreams shattered under the weight of reality. And yet, amidst the grief, there burned a fire, an unyielding refusal to surrender, to let despair claim him. "It is not sorrow that defines me," he replied after a moment, his voice roughened by emotion but resolute nonetheless. "It is the choice to rise above it. To keep moving forward, even when every step feels like walking through ash." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, carrying the weight of truths too painful to articulate yet too vital to ignore. The queen regarded him silently for a moment, her expression softening ever so slightly. Then, without warning, she extended a hand, her fingers brushing lightly against his armored forearm. The contact sent a jolt through him, not of pain but of something far more profound, a connection that transcended language, species, and time itself. In that fleeting touch, he sensed echoes of her own struggles, her own sacrifices. For the first time, he realized that perhaps they were not so different after all. "Perhaps," she said softly, almost to herself, "the legends speak of us both." The revelation unfolded slowly, like the first rays of dawn breaking over a desolate horizon. As the queen withdrew her hand, the chamber seemed to shift around them, the crystalline walls dissolving into visions that played out like scenes from a forgotten past. Images of war-torn planets and burning cities flickered into existence, accompanied by the haunting echoes of screams and the deafening roar of collapsing stars. The warrior recognized some of these moments. They were fragments of his own history, battles he had fought and worlds he had failed to save. But interspersed among them were glimpses of something else, something unfamiliar yet achingly resonant. Fleets of alien ships retreating in disarray, cities rebuilt from ashes, and faces of beings he had never met gazing skyward with gratitude. "You see," the queen began, her voice imbued with a quiet urgency, "your legend is not confined to your deeds alone. It ripples outward, touching lives across galaxies in ways you cannot begin to comprehend." She gestured toward the shifting tableau, her movements graceful yet commanding. "These are the stories told in my realm, tales of a human warrior who defied annihilation, who stood against the tide of destruction when all hope seemed lost. You are spoken of in whispers, revered as a harbinger of resilience, a symbol of defiance against the inevitable." Her words struck him with the force of revelation, stirring emotions he had long suppressed. For years, he had seen himself as nothing more than a soldier, a tool forged by necessity and tempered by loss. To think that his actions had inspired reverence, even worship, was incomprehensible. Yet the evidence was there, undeniable and vivid, etched into the collective memory of a civilization he had never known existed. He felt a pang of guilt mingled with pride, the weight of expectations settling heavily on his shoulders. "But why?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of images swirling around them. "Why would anyone revere someone like me? I've made mistakes, costly ones. Worlds have fallen because of my failures. Lives have been lost because I wasn't strong enough, fast enough, clever enough." The queen's expression softened, her luminous eyes reflecting a sadness that mirrored his own. "Because strength is not measured solely by victory," she replied gently. "It is found in the willingness to rise after falling, to endure when surrender seems the only path. Your failures do not diminish you, human, they define you. They show that you are not invincible, yet you persist. And that is what makes you extraordinary." Her words stirred something deep within him, a spark of recognition that illuminated corners of his soul he had long abandoned. He had always believed his worth lay in his ability to protect, to shield others from harm. But now, confronted with the truth of how his story had been woven into the tapestry of this alien culture, he began to see himself differently. Perhaps his greatest strength was not in his victories, but in his capacity to inspire others to find their own courage, to remind them that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope could still exist. The visions around them shifted again, this time focusing on moments he had never witnessed. He saw children on distant planets learning of his exploits, their eyes wide with admiration as elders recounted tales of his battles. He saw artists crafting sculptures and murals in his likeness, immortalizing his silhouette against backdrops of shattered moons and blazing suns. Most poignantly, he saw gatherings of beings from countless species, united not by blood or creed but by the shared belief that his example proved the impossible could be achieved. It was humbling, overwhelming, and strangely liberating. Yet amid the awe-inspiring imagery, a shadow crept into the periphery of his awareness. Not all reactions to his legend were celebratory. Some faces bore expressions of resentment, their eyes narrowed with suspicion or outright hostility. Whispers of dissent threaded through the visual narrative, voices questioning whether a single individual deserved such veneration. "They fear you," the queen said quietly, drawing his attention back to her. "Fear what you represent. The idea that one being can alter the course of history. Fear that your presence challenges the natural order." Her admission brought clarity to the unease he had felt since arriving on this world. The tension in the air, the guarded glances of her courtiers, it all made sense now. To some, his legend was not a source of inspiration but a threat, a disruption to the delicate balance they had worked so hard to maintain. And yet, despite this opposition, the queen stood before him, unapologetic in her admiration. Why? What did she see in him that others could not, or would not, acknowledge? Before he could voice the question, she reached out once more, this time placing her hand firmly on his chest, directly over his heart. The contact sent another wave of energy coursing through him, but this time it carried a different quality, one of warmth and reassurance. "Because I understand you," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "I have walked paths similar to yours, shouldered burdens that seemed insurmountable. I know what it means to be both revered and reviled, to carry the hopes of millions while bearing the weight of their fears." Her confession startled him, forcing him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about her. Until now, he had viewed her as untouchable, a being of pure grace and power untouched by the struggles that plagued lesser creatures. But her words revealed cracks in that facade, hints of vulnerability that made her seem human. The realization unsettled him, not because it diminished her in his eyes, but because it complicated the dynamic between them. If she was not the infallible ruler he had assumed, then what role did she truly play in this unfolding drama? As if sensing his confusion, she withdrew her hand and took a step back, her regal demeanor returning like a mask slipping into place. "Come," she said, turning toward the exit of the chamber. "There is much more you need to see. Much more you need to understand." Without waiting for his response, she began to walk, her movements fluid and deliberate, leaving him little choice but to follow. The journey that followed led them through corridors that seemed alive, their crystalline surfaces pulsating with rhythmic patterns of light and shadow. Each step echoed softly, blending with the ambient hum of the structure itself, as though the building were breathing in sync with its inhabitants. The queen moved with an effortless grace, her presence commanding yet serene, while the warrior trailed behind, his thoughts a turbulent sea of questions and revelations. Despite the grandeur surrounding them, there was an undercurrent of tension, a palpable sense that they were treading into territory fraught with significance. Their path eventually brought them to a vast chamber unlike any they had passed through before. Here, the walls were adorned with intricate carvings that depicted scenes of cosmic events, supernovae exploding in bursts of radiant energy, galaxies colliding in slow-motion dances of destruction and rebirth, and civilizations rising and falling like waves upon an eternal shore. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an artifact that seemed to defy logic. It was a sphere, translucent and shimmering with internal lights that shifted and swirled as if containing entire universes within its confines. The air around it vibrated faintly, creating a sensation akin to standing near a storm about to break. "This," the queen said, her voice reverent as she approached the pedestal, "is the nexus core. It is the heart of our civilization, the source of our knowledge and power." She paused, her gaze fixed on the artifact, her expression unreadable. "And it has chosen you." The words hit him like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through his already frayed composure. "Chosen me?" he repeated, incredulity coloring his tone. "For what? I'm just a man, a warrior, yes, but still only human. How could something like this choose me?" Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty flicker within their luminous depths. "That is the question we must answer together," she admitted, her voice softer now, tinged with vulnerability. "The nexus core is sentient, in a way that transcends our understanding. It perceives potential, possibility, and purpose. And it believes you hold the key to averting a catastrophe that threatens not just my people, but all life in the galaxy." The weight of her words settled over him like a mantle, heavy and suffocating. He wanted to protest, to argue that she was mistaken, that he was ill-equipped for such a monumental task. But deep down, he knew denial would be futile. The pieces were aligning too perfectly, the legends, the reverence, the fear, all converging on this singular moment. Whatever fate awaited him, it was clear he could no longer turn away. As if sensing his turmoil, the queen stepped closer, her proximity both comforting and unsettling. "You are not alone in this," she assured him, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her eyes. "I will stand with you, guide you, and share whatever burdens lie ahead. But know this, you were brought here for a reason. Whether by chance or design, your presence is no accident." Her words stirred something primal within him, a dormant instinct that whispered of destiny and inevitability. Yet alongside that stirring came doubt, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. Could he trust her? Was she truly an ally, or merely another player in a game far larger than either of them understood? The ambiguity of their bond, their mutual admiration tempered by lingering mistrust, only added to the complexity of the situation. "What happens if I fail?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, raw and unguarded, exposing the fragility beneath his hardened exterior. She hesitated, her luminous gaze clouding with something akin to sorrow. "Then we all perish," she replied simply, the gravity of her statement pressing down on them both. "But failure is not an option. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone who dares to hope." With those words, she extended her hand once more, this time inviting rather than commanding. He stared at it for a long moment, the decision before him monumental and irreversible. Finally, he reached out, his calloused fingers brushing against hers in a gesture that sealed their fates together. As their hands clasped, the nexus core flared brightly, bathing the chamber in a blinding light that seemed to pierce through time and space itself. The brilliance of the Nexus core's light enveloped them, erasing the boundaries of the chamber and plunging them into a kaleidoscope of sensations that defied comprehension. It was as though they had been thrust into the very fabric of existence itself, suspended in a realm where past, present, and future intertwined like threads in an infinite tapestry. The warrior felt his consciousness expand, stretching beyond the confines of his mortal shell to touch something vast and incomprehensible. Memories he didn't know he possessed surged forth. Visions of ancient battles fought under alien suns, civilizations rising and falling in cycles too grand for any single lifetime, and whispers of cosmic forces locked in eternal struggle. Beside him, the queen stood unwavering, her ethereal form shimmering with an inner radiance that seemed to harmonize with the pulsating energy of the Nexus core. Her grip on his hand remained firm, grounding him even as the torrent of information threatened to overwhelm his senses. He could feel her presence, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, as if their minds were merging, sharing fragments of thought and memory that transcended language. Through this connection, he glimpsed pieces of her own journey, the weight of leadership she bore, the sacrifices she had made to protect her people, and the loneliness that came with wielding power so immense it isolated her from those she sought to save. And then, amidst the chaos of fragmented realities, a singular image emerged, clear and unshakable. It was a vision of destruction on a scale that dwarfed anything he had ever witnessed, a cataclysmic event that would consume entire star systems, leaving behind only silence and ash. At its center loomed a shadowy figure, its form indistinct yet suffused with malice. The entity exuded a malevolent intelligence, a force of entropy bent on unraveling the delicate balance of creation. As the vision unfolded, the warrior realized with chilling clarity that this was the catastrophe the queen had spoken of, the impending doom that hung over all life in the galaxy. "We must stop it," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of collapsing worlds and screaming stars. His words were not directed at the queen but rather at the void itself, as though speaking them aloud might anchor him against the despair threatening to consume him. "Yes," the queen replied, her voice resonating with both resolve and sorrow. "But stopping it will require more than strength or courage. This is no ordinary adversary. It is a manifestation of chaos itself, born from the fractures in the universe's design. To confront it, we must delve deeper than either of us has ever gone before." Her words carried a weight that pressed down on his chest, each syllable laden with implications he could scarcely grasp. Yet even as fear coiled within him, a spark of defiance ignited, refusing to let despair take hold. He turned to face her fully, his eyes locking onto hers with a determination that burned through the haze of uncertainty. "Then tell me what I need to do," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "Whatever it takes, I'll do it." For a moment, the queen simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a faint smile touched her lips, a gesture that was equal parts admiration and melancholy. "You truly are remarkable," she whispered, almost to herself. So many would have faltered by now, overwhelmed by the enormity of what lies ahead. But you stand ready to face the abyss without hesitation. Her acknowledgement stirred something deep within him, a flicker of pride tempered by humility. He wasn't extraordinary. He was simply someone who had learned to endure, to keep moving forward even when every step felt like walking through fire. And yet, standing here with her, bathed in the unearthly glow of the Nexus core, he couldn't help but wonder if perhaps there was more to him than he had ever allowed himself to believe. Before he could dwell further on the thought, the queen released his hand and stepped closer to the pedestal. With deliberate movements, she placed her palms on either side of the Nexus core, her fingers splayed wide as though drawing strength from its pulsating energy. The artifact responded immediately, its internal light swirling faster, casting intricate patterns across the chamber walls. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more resonant until it vibrated through their very bones. "The Nexus core holds the answers we seek," she explained, her voice rising above the crescendo of sound. "But accessing them requires a sacrifice, a merging of essence, a blending of wills. Together, we must become one with its consciousness, allowing it to guide us to the truth." The warrior frowned, unease prickling at the edges of his resolve. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked cautiously, his instincts warning him that nothing this powerful came without cost. Her gaze softened, though her expression remained resolute. "It will demand pieces of ourselves, memories, emotions, perhaps even fragments of our souls. But it is the only way. Without unity, we cannot hope to withstand what awaits us. He hesitated, the gravity of her words sinking in. To surrender part of himself, to open himself up so completely to something as enigmatic and potentially dangerous as the Nexus core, was a risk he hadn't anticipated. Yet as he looked into her luminous eyes, he saw not coercion or manipulation but genuine trust. She was asking him to take this leap alongside her, to place his faith in her as much as in the artifact itself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the knot of apprehension tightening in his stomach. "Let's do it." The Queen's smile widened slightly, gratitude flickering in her gaze. "Then prepare yourself," she instructed, stepping aside to make room for him at the pedestal. "This will not be easy." Together, they positioned themselves on opposite sides of the Nexus core, their hands hovering just above its surface. The air between them crackled with anticipation, charged with the promise of transformation. As they exchanged one final glance, the warrior felt a surge of resolve solidify within him. Whatever lay ahead, whatever trials awaited them, he would face them head-on, for himself, for her, and for the countless lives depending on them. With a deep breath, they simultaneously lowered their hands onto the artifact. The instant their skin made contact, a jolt of energy surged through them, binding them together in a shared current of light and sound. The world around them dissolved once more, plunging them into a vortex of shifting colors and shapes that defied logic. Visions flooded their minds, images of forgotten ages, ancient prophecies, and cryptic symbols etched into the fabric of reality. Each revelation brought with it a wave of emotion so intense it threatened to overwhelm them, forcing them to cling to each other's presence like lifelines in a storm. Through it all, the warrior focused on the Queen's unwavering spirit, drawing strength from her resilience as they navigated the labyrinth of knowledge unfolding before them. Together, they pushed deeper, driven by a shared purpose that transcended individual fears and doubts. They were no longer two separate beings but a single entity forged from determination and trust, united in their quest to uncover the truth hidden within the Nexus core. As the visions continued to unfold, one thing became painfully clear. The shadowy figure at the heart of the impending catastrophe was not merely an external threat. It was a reflection of something far more insidious, a fracture within the universe itself that mirrored the flaws and fears of those who inhabited it. To confront this entity, they would need to confront themselves, delving into the darkest corners of their own souls to find the strength needed to prevail. And so, bound by fate and necessity, they pressed onward, their journey taking them further than either had imagined possible. The answers they sought lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be claimed, but at what cost, neither could yet say. All they knew was that retreat was no longer an option. As the final vision faded, the warrior and the Queen stood united, their essences forever intertwined. The Nexus core dimmed, its light now a steady pulse, as if acknowledging their readiness. "We are one now," the Queen whispered, her voice trembling with both awe and resolve. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." He nodded, his heart heavy yet unyielding. "Then let's finish this." The chamber around them began to dissolve, pulling them back into the tangible world. But the shadowy figure loomed larger than ever, its presence seeping into their reality. Time was running out. And as they stepped forward, hand in hand, the first tremors of the apocalypse rippled across the stars. The battle for existence had begun.